So hi, my name is Jim Palmieri. I'm the CEO of Agitare Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to the webinar on Accelerating Applications Development with Actifio's Copy Data Virtualization. So we're excited to be the sponsors for this webinar. Agitare Technologies is a boutique consulting firm that specializes in several areas, including cloud, business continuity, disaster recovery. We provide a wide range of services from IT strategies, architecture design and implementation, DR vendor selection, and we can develop your BIA and help you with your DR solutions design and deployment. And we're a partner and reseller of several major product companies, including Actifio, and we're a master partner for CenturyLink. So some housekeeping. Before we start, we'll have the phones muted during the presentation. Please provide your questions using the chat controls in the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll leave time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions. We'll be recording the session, and we'll be posting it to YouTube and our resource page on the Agitare website. And for those that are coming to our Cloud Talk, we run a local Cloud Talk community group here in Seattle on meetup.com. We'll not only put the link out there for the recorded session, but we'll post the presentation. Okay, so this is an exciting topic. And I think most of you know disruptive technologies like cloud and mobile and the evolving DevOps organizational models are forcing changes in the way we think about the software development release process and how we manage systems and data across the hybrid enterprise. So the introduction of what Actifio calls the Copy Data Virtualization, it's changing the way companies are managing their release methodologies, and it's enabling new business continuity and disaster recovery models. So we think this technology is really cool. And for those that have experience running IT operations, this does a great job addressing the copy data problem. So I'm excited to introduce two individuals from Actifio, Chandra Reddy, who's the VP of Services Product Marketing, and Ashok Ram, Head of Product Development. They're going to talk about accelerating applications development and data virtualization, and they're going to show you a cool demo of the Actifio Sky product. So quick introductions. So Chandra's been with Actifio since 2013. He works with a lot of service providers to help them develop and launch services with the Actifio product. And you're going to see a cool example. We've been working with him and team to deploy Sky on the CenturyLink cloud. So prior to Actifio, Chandra worked for SunGard in the role of Senior Director of Product Management. He's held positions as Director of Engineering at Computer Associates, was Director of Product Management at ArcServe and Exosoft, and he's got 4 patents on variable block duplication algorithms. Very cool. Ashok Ram brings more than 16 years of developing and managing a wide range of solutions in the storage industry. At Actifio, he leads the product delivery and global deployment for the Actifio Sky product line. And Ashok was recently part of founding team for Exagrid Systems, and he's held a variety of executive positions and leading initiatives in the storage and telecom industry. So Chandra, you're on. I think you've got controls. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar today. Today, we're going to talk about Actifio Copy Data Virtualization and how you can leverage this for a lot of different use cases. So when we talk to our enterprise customers, they generally have 3 strategic priorities. They want an awesome solution around resiliency, which is about how to protect their data much better than the way they are doing today and offer high availability to their mission-critical applications. The second priority for them typically is mobility, on how to transition applications from one data center to another data center. And more often, we are hearing use cases around how can they transition their applications from their hosted premises into the cloud. And the third use case is around agility, which is around how to accelerate their application development lifecycle, get their products into the market much more faster than the competition, and create a differentiation value for their customers. So Actifio solves problems in all these 3 areas, caters to resiliency, mobility, and agility. And we are going to focus today primarily on mobility and agility use cases. So what is copy data virtualization, right? So what Actifio does is it does an awesome job in capturing the data at a block level. It doesn't matter what's the source, could be databases, could be physical servers or virtual machines, various operating system flavors. It does an incremental forever capture of the data. It only captures the change blocks. And then once it has this, what we call as golden copy of the data, we manage that and provision it in such a way that we can almost instantaneously offer you multiple copies of the same production data virtually, so that you could use those virtual copies for many different use cases such as business continuity, dev test, analytics, and of course data protection. So that's how Actifio manages the data and uses the data. And we have hundreds of enterprise customers. This is our focus area. Our average enterprise customer has at least 50 terabytes of data protected and uses us for all those 3 use cases that I mentioned, which is resiliency, mobility, and agility. We also, a lot of Actifio powered clouds exist today. There's almost 40 service providers who use Actifio for offering variety of services around disaster recovery, backup, and test dev services in their cloud. And we were born global. We have offices everywhere in 35 countries worldwide. Our development primarily happens here in Waltham, Massachusetts, suburbs of Boston. And so I wanted to share an experience with a customer of ours actually who bought Actifio for resiliency use case. So basically what they wanted was a better backup product and a better DR product so that when the production goes down, Actifio can bring up their virtual machines very quickly. So in this example, he used our product named as Actifio Resiliency Director, which brought up 100 virtual machines in 20 minutes. So once they were able to accomplish this, we had a meeting with them, and basically what this customer, I'm going to name him as Kevin. So what Kevin shared with us was he also has other challenges in his business model. So what these guys do is that basically they're in a distribution business. They acquire very small companies every quarter, and they have to integrate their applications into their parent application. So, that's their business model. That's how they grow, acquisitions and integrations. The challenge that he was facing was, offering, compute and infrastructure for all of this development phase. For example, typically in the development phase goes through unit testing in a development phase, and then automation QA, the build happens, and then the build gets checked in, and then the functionality testing is offered, and then comes into a staging environment. Well, this is where performance, security, upgrade, and UAT testing happens. Then it's rolled out in the production. And finally, of course, production support happens that's where any bugs coming out of the production systems are debugged and patched for functionality testing. So the challenge which he had was that his infrastructure was underutilized, because the way his model worked was every quarter when they make an acquisition, the infrastructure was being utilized only for 50% of the time. So as an example, if in week 1 the acquisition of the small company happens, the application integration effort starts in week 4, and they have 2 sprint cycles of each of 2 weeks. And then once the sprint cycles are done, they go through the UAT and go GA, which means the new application of the small company that they acquired has been fully integrated. So for the rest of the 6 weeks in that quarter, the compute was not at all being utilized. So they decided that they want to be more efficient, so they wanted to move to the cloud. So that's the decision they made on how to move these applications into the cloud. The moment they made the decision, then he started to analyze on how does he move those applications into the cloud. He realized that he has probably 2 SQL databases somewhere around with 1.5 terabytes, and an Oracle database, and a couple of MySQL databases. So how does he take approximately 3 terabytes of data for every test cycle into the cloud? And that was a pretty big problem because bandwidth was limited. Moving 3 terabytes of data was an issue for him. The second problem he had was around, okay, now that the data is in the cloud, he can't give access to these copies of production data to his dev and QA engineers. The data had to be masked before the data could be presented to the dev and QA engineers. So the data masking needs to be done in the cloud, and not only that, it has to be automated. He could not resort to manual human procedures of masking the data. The third problem he brought up was he needs to present a copy of the production database to 5 different teams. For as an example, POC needs a copy, the proof of concept team, the dev team needs a copy, automation QA needs a copy, the QA team needs a copy, and the staging team needs a copy. Now, 3 times 5, 15 terabytes of storage in the cloud doesn't necessarily come cheap. So too much of storage consumption, and it's not only about storage cost, the manual processes involved in creating all these copies, would absolutely delay the development time. So this was the third problem he had. And the fourth problem was, now that the testing is being done, every 2 weeks he needs the refresh of the production data. So now again, the production data has to be brought into the cloud for data refresh so that the testing teams can test on the most recent data. And now he has to go through the same process again, which is about data masking and then copying the data. So this was too much for him to do it manually. So these are the 4 problems he stated. So the moment I heard about this, we basically brought him back into our corporate headquarters in Waltham, Boston, and we brought in our best solution architect. And here is how basically we solved the problem. So we recognized that the customer was very happy with resiliency, which we provided, but he had a problem with mobility and agility, and he was exploring on how Actifio can help this customer. So basically what our solution architect did was he offered 4 solutions to the 4 problems that is mentioned. The number 1 was, how does he move data from his production environment into the cloud? Actifio can actually do an awesome job with compression and data deduplication before it sends the data over the WAN. So 3 terabytes of data gets smashed down to 1 terabyte of data before it hits the WAN. And most importantly, it only does incremental ingestion from these databases forever. So now that we solved the problem of minimizing the amount of data that has to move from one location to another location, the second problem that he had was data masking, and that too automated. So what Actifio offers is an automatic way, a workflow engine, wherein you can specify your own scripts to mask the data. And hence, it creates a copy of the data, which we call as live clone, and all of the data is masked there. So whatever your script is, if you inject into this workflow, it automatically invokes it at the right point, and you have the masked copy of the data. And once that's done, Actifio can do virtual copies of this data, which means that if this data was 3 terabytes that after masking, when we have to create 5 different copies, we don't need 15 terabytes of storage. We just need 3 terabytes of storage, which is exactly the same as the original data. So we have the technology to make a virtual copy, give an illusion that every POC team and dev team and QA teams and staging teams have their own copy of the 3 terabyte database, but actually those are just rewritable virtual volumes that have been provisioned for their virtual machine. So that's how we solved the problem of reducing the storage consumption in the cloud and also almost kind of eliminated the time to create 15 terabytes of copy storage. And the last problem was, how does it refresh the data for testing? Since Actifio captures incremental forever, so for example, if the 3 terabytes was captured once, after that only changed blocks of data in the production databases would be captured and sent over the WAN into the cloud. So the data is automatically refreshed, and hence the next day when the dev and QA teams are about to test, all the data is refreshed and it's rehydrated for them. So basically, at the end of this discussion, we solved not only the resiliency problem, but both the mobility, which is moving data from his data center into another data center or cloud, and also the agility, which is about accelerating their application development time by 2 things. One is cutting down the storage costs, and second is eliminating the manual processes and automating the management of copies of the data. So with that, I will hand this over to Ashok, who is going to describe what the demo environment is today. Everything that I described, you're going to see a live demo. And back to you, Ashok.
Thank you, Chandra. So thank you for joining, folks. So what I'll be talking about briefly over the next couple of slides is describing the environment, describing what we're going to show, and then actually walk you through the actual process in the product. So let's start off with the demo environment. So on the left, in the blue cloud, you see that represents the Amazon Web Services, the Amazon Cloud. We've deployed Actifio Sky, our virtual copy data appliance, running natively on the cloud. And for the demo purposes, it's managing a SQL database that's roughly 1 terabyte in size. So by managing, it's basically capturing the database periodically, that's set by the SLA or the policy in the Actifio Sky, and then replicating that data out, again based on policy, to another Actifio Sky instance in CenturyLink Cloud, right? So the CenturyLink Cloud instance is also running the same Actifio virtual appliance, the data that's being sent over is deduplicated, and we only send the changes over after the first time. Again, reiterating Chandra's point. Once the data is in the CenturyLink cloud, we are provisioning 5 Windows machines in the CenturyLink cloud, and we will show you the logical mounts of this database on those 5 machines in 5 minutes. So essentially, we can bring up 5 1 terabyte SQL instances in 5 minutes, all on the CenturyLink cloud. Moving on to the demo. So what you're seeing here is essentially the Actifio desktop running on Amazon. It is the user interface to manage the virtual appliance on Amazon. And in here, as you can see, as an application being managed, we're looking at the database here called the OOBDB. This is a database that is natively sitting on Amazon, and here is a preview to the database. This is a SQL Server database that is sitting here, and just to give you a feel for the size, this is about a terabyte in size. So this database is being managed by the Actifio appliance here, and this appliance is sending the changes over to the CenturyLink cloud every 6 hours. So if you can look on the right-hand side, this is the UI showing the appliance running in the CenturyLink cloud. And what you can see here is on the CenturyLink cloud, as part of the remote application, we see the database available and ready for use. This database is now is being refreshed, as Chandra said, from the primary side on a periodic basis, and we only send the changes over, so the refresh cycles are very, very short. What we are going to show you next is essentially the CenturyLink Cloud portal. So this is the portal for the CenturyLink Cloud, and as you can see, we have 5 Windows virtual machines that basically are running on the cloud. These machines are going to mount the database that was replicated over from the Amazon cloud, and we can show you the mount operations next. So as you can see, as Chandra mentioned, the live clone was replicated today at 10 a.m. So we open up and we start the mount operation, and we pick a server and we submit the mount operation. At this point, the Actifio appliance is presenting the disk to the Windows server on the CenturyLink cloud. A couple of key things to note here is, we do have the Actifio appliance running on Amazon and CenturyLink cloud, but that is just as a way to demonstrate the fact that the appliance can be installed in a public cloud infrastructure.
So Ashok, it could be any data center to any data center, or any public cloud to any public cloud. In this example, we consider CenturyLink Cloud as the place where people can do the test dev.
That is correct, Chandra. Okay. So we are just considering this as a place to basically showcase that the virtual appliance can be installed in any cloud.
Okay. And what you demonstrated was you took a 1 terabyte volume, SQL database volume, and mounted it to a live virtual machine in CenturyLink Cloud. So, so what's happening right now? Is it that we know that it's not actually copying the entire 1 terabyte. So what exactly is happening in the background?
So what Actifio does is it basically has the 1 terabyte database sitting in its disk set on the CenturyLink Cloud, and it's presenting logical copies of this data to each of the Windows machines. So each Windows machine is seeing a logical writable copy of the database, and as these machines want to make changes, Actifio virtual appliance is smart enough to just store those changes.
Okay.
So you're not replicating the 1 terabyte database across the 5 Windows servers.
So a good analogy would be something like an ESX server which is presenting 5 virtual machines and giving an illusion that you have 5 servers running, but actually there's only one underlying physical server. So similarly, you have only one terabyte SQL database, but now you're trying to give an illusion that there are actually 5 virtual copies.
That is accurate. Okay. So there is 5 from just to illustrate that point, if you look at our consumption in the CenturyLink cloud, you can tell, even though we're presenting the database to 5 different Windows hosts, we have taken up about 1.2 terabytes of the database. Okay. So basically, it's the database plus a little bit of metadata that we store is logically representing all the copies that are being mounted out.
So while you're mounting the next onto the next virtual machine, so this UI is good. So we are familiar with this UI. But what if there is an end user out there who wants to consume this via APIs? Can you describe more about that?
Sure. So any action that I'm doing here via the UI, which is as you can see here, I'm mounting and I'm picking a host. This is the 4th Windows machine I'm mounting to. All these actions are drivable using REST APIs. Okay. So the product offers REST APIs for us to drive all the operations that you can see in the UI.
Okay. So as an example, if I have my own workflow engine using which I am used to spinning up compute for my dev and QA engineers, I could actually invoke a few more APIs, such as enumerate the instances that are available, and then once you enumerate, you could then mount one of those instances on many of these dev and QA virtual machines, and once the testing is done, you unmount it and repeat the whole process.
Oh, absolutely. The entire process, which we call workflow, it can be automated and scheduled to run per the test process of your enterprise. So if you want this process to run on a weekly basis, where you refresh the database every week, we can absolutely, you can either script it or you can do it with UI, your choice.
So basically, there are 2 ways to consume this functionality. One is through the workflow engine that we have, which automates everything, or an end user, if they have their own orchestration system, they can just invoke APIs and consume this functionality.
Absolutely, that's right. So the APIs will help you get finer control, and if you want to embed this API into a higher level orchestration workflow, that is possible as well.
Okay. All right, how do the mounts look now?
So as you can see, this particular application has been mounted on 4 different machines so far. And we're just going to go to each one of those machines and take a look and see what the database is here. So this one is just, what you're seeing here is a Windows desktop into one of those Windows virtual machines. We're going to bring up remote desktop sessions to each one of the database, each one of the Windows machines on the CenturyLink cloud, and try to open up the OOBB database. So as you can see, I'm just attaching. So as you can see, the OOB database was now presented as a mount. This is the drive letter that was presented, and I hit OK. And at this point, it is basically the mount process has started, and this is on one of the systems, and we can repeat this on the 5 systems. As you can see, the OOB database is now available and ready for use in the CenturyLink cloud on one of the Windows machines.
Got it. And so it looks exciting that you could do these 5 mounts on 5 different machines in less than 5 minutes, but it seems boring that you have to bring up the SQL on each of them and attach the database. Is there an automated way to do this?
Absolutely. So this whole process can be scripted as well. So what we do provide is the capability to do the mount, and as I said, you can embed our script of mounting and bringing up the database into your higher level workflow, which even maybe installs the Windows machines, installs SQL, and then mounts the database, and then starts your processing. Okay. So that is, all of this can be automated, and we give you finer controls over when you want to do this in terms of what schedules you want. So here's the second machine mounting the same database.
Okay. So let's say that I mounted this, and now I have another app server and a web server. Let's call this as something as mybookdepot.com. This is a web application, and I start using this database and start testing this. And at some point of time, in my own application, I'm an end user or DevOps, and I see a bug in my software. So now what I need to do is I need to continue and test more, but I also want to capture the state of where I am.
Sure.
So is it possible to take a snapshot of my mounted volume and preserve it so that my development engineers can later on debug this, and I move on and test something else?
Absolutely. So each copy that's presented to each Windows host is an individual copy for the host. So you can represent that copy of your database. For instance, this Windows machine that I just brought up, which is our third Windows machine, has the database. If I were to go make changes to some of the tables, I can then discover this application and have Actifio appliance running on CenturyLink manage this as an application as well, which means it's going to capture the changes for this data at the intervals that you want to capture it in.
So basically, I can daisy chain the snaps, so I can take a snap off a snap and preserve that for my later on the developers coming in and taking a look into their problem.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so here's the fifth database that's coming online. So as you can see, you've now seen 5 machines bring up this database in less than 5 minutes.
And what if an end user has a use case where every week they want to get the latest copy of their 3 terabyte databases into the cloud and continue the testing?
So there are a couple of ways we can control that. So if you look at the policy that's being delivered here, in this case we say take the database and sync it up from Amazon to CenturyLink every 6 hours.
Okay.
So you could do this every 3 weeks or whatever frequency you want. And moving on to the CenturyLink cloud, if you look at the live clone and the options available here, there is an option to basically refresh the live clone, which can also be scripted.
Okay.
So you can say you might be using the database for an extra day, so you can set your script on CenturyLink to trigger based on your workflow at the target.
Got it. So basically the workflow would be something like this: refresh, mount, scrub the data for data masking, unmount from there, mount as many copies as you want wherever you want, do the testing, unmount, and then again the same process starts again.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So in a sense, what we saw over the last few minutes was the case where we were able to mount this logical database copy to 5 Windows machines running on the CenturyLink cloud.
Awesome, Ashok. Thank you so much. And with that, Jim, back to you.
Great, thank you. I mean, that's really great. Boy, for people that have responsibilities for managing IT operations, this is a really nice tool. So I have a couple questions. Let's start with, in terms of what we're showing here, is this considered what we're doing a backup as a service in the CenturyLink cloud, or is it more?
This can be way more than backup. As you saw here, backup was just one aspect of this, wherein we got the data from wherever the customer's environment is into the CenturyLink cloud. So there is a second copy available. And if you look at this reference architecture, here you would see that the data was backed up on the production side and then went into the secondary side. And in the secondary side, you can actually retain the data, the backup images, because of our massive deduplication. You could retain the data for 7 years or 5 years or 3 years or only 30 days, however you want it. So that absolutely, backup as a service is a low-hanging fruit. But I think the more value-add services is around disaster recovery as a service and agility, which is test dev, and accelerate the application development, as you just saw in the demo. So those are the extra value-add services that you could launch on top of Actifio using one platform.
Great. And so how does this, in terms of the software, does this replace VMware?
This does not replace VMware. This is to augment VMware's capabilities by taking for example, some of our customers are using, or service providers also, are using Actifio to recover 200 virtual machines in 1 hour in a remote site. Now that remote site could be customer second site, or that remote site could be a private cloud in a service provider's hosted data center, or it could be a VMware public cloud hosted in any of the service provider's data center, right? So 200 virtual machines in 1 hour, that's the recovery for a production VMware environment. So as you can see, we are not replacing the VMware, but we are creating copies of the VMware at a second site anytime they want disaster recovery. And the second, obviously, is about all about application acceleration, which is VMware can create and does an awesome job in bringing up compute, right? Bringing up virtual machines, creating virtual machines very quickly. What we do is virtualize the data layer and present the data to all those virtual machines very quickly.
Like for instance, to just augment Chandra's point, the Windows servers or the SQL servers alone in CenturyLink wouldn't be very useful if the database wasn't there for them to work with. Right? So in a sense, VMware helps us bring those virtual Windows servers fairly easily, and Actifio complements that by presenting the data with the same agility. So now you can marry the two and give you a very good level of service agreement there.
Absolutely. And you get to leverage for especially test data, depending on the data type, you get the opportunity to leverage the variable nature of the cloud to spin up and spin down, keep your costs down. It's a really good story.
That is correct. I mean, it's not uncommon to see actually customers having SAP applications, Oracle ERP applications needing 15 to 16 copies of their production application. And today they have to create, physical copies of the storage, and there's a lot of manual processes involved. Bloats up your storage costs and infrastructure costs, bloats up your human operations costs also because of having to manage the physical copies of all of this. And then there is a security context, right? A lot of customers actually outsource their development and QA organization to external organizations. And, data masking is extremely critical in those areas. So now you have added manual processes between two different organizations, and that gets in the way of agility. So that's the problem we are trying to solve, wherein we want to streamline all of this using our workflow, or we can fit into customers' workflow using our APIs.
Yeah. I think in terms of the value of ITIL-based best practices and the tool completeness, it really gives you a good story, especially if you're doing dev around the world. Doing dev on West Coast, East Coast, offshore. It gives you that control.
That's correct.
Another question, and I think you might have answered this earlier when you talked about the different types of using cloud to cloud right now, but you could have a mix and match. But so does the customer need to have both Actifio and the CenturyLink cloud? So maybe that's the context. Go ahead.
Yes. So it could be anywhere. For example, so many of our 500 plus enterprise customers today, they have their own 2 data centers, or they have a production in their premises, and their DR data center is the service provider. So they use Actifio in both locations, right? So Actifio comes in 2 flavors actually, a physical appliance and a virtual machine appliance. So a lot of our customers use physical appliances as well. In this case, where we wanted to demonstrate everything in the cloud, obviously in the cloud nothing can be physical. So that's where we use Actifio Sky, which is a virtual machine with all the functionalities that the physical appliance has. So you can absolutely use Actifio in both flavors, pretty much anywhere. Anywhere there is an IT infrastructure, Actifio seamlessly fits there for all these functionalities.
Right, and you're showing the Actifio Sky appliance in the CenturyLink cloud because that's how it pulls it all together.
That's correct.
Correct.
Yeah. Can you show us again the Sky Snapshot storage pool?
Go ahead.
Sure. So this is the instance on the CenturyLink cloud, and this is the snapshot storage pool here. So as you can see here, 1.2 terabytes is taken up, and that has been presented out, like I said, to 5 instances out.
Got it. That's really nice to be able to spin up that many instances so quickly, and be able to manage your storage capacity. You get speed, you get agility, and you get reduced storage costs. How about, do you have to create the virtual machine in the CenturyLink cloud prior to copying the database? Can you talk a little bit about the process of deploying?
Absolutely. So the order really does not matter at this point in time. So essentially what needs to happen is the data, you can provision the Actifio Sky appliance on CenturyLink and start your data replication process from the Amazon cloud to the CenturyLink cloud. And the appliance will keep the data in CenturyLink cloud. And then when you need your compute in CenturyLink, you basically spin up the Windows virtual machines here and present them out.
So basically, if your test cycle is only for 1 week in a month, right, you will have the Actifio Sky receiving the data throughout this entire process, so that remember you're also using Actifio for backup as a service and DR as a service. But now let's focus on the test dev as a service, right? So when you need to test only for that 1 week in a month, as an example, you need to bring up those 5 SQL virtual machines as we demonstrated only during that 1 week. And so the Actifio in a steady state situation is continuously trickling the data from the production side into the cloud. And whenever the testing needs to happen, for that 1 week, you bring up the virtual machines and do the mounts and do your testing. And once the testing is done, you shut down those virtual machines, so you are not paying for that compute. And then it's business as usual.
Great, thank you. So I've got a question from John. Does the GUI create the script? You saw a script button. He was wondering if an action is created automatically, or does it just open a text window where you manually create the scripts?
At this point, it opens up a text window where you manually put a script in there.
Yeah.
But the script can be fed in an automated fashion as well. So if the whole user interface, if you had an orchestration layer sitting on CenturyLink, you could drive the entire Actifio appliance using scripts or using the REST APIs.
Got it. Okay, if you have more questions, type them in. So I have a question. So tell me a little bit about, when you start building your storage strategy, you have fast, you have SSDs, you've got variable speed drives, you've got tape drive. Tell me a little bit about how you handle the design and architecture of your storage strategy and how it applies into the Actifio tool.
That's a great question, Jim. So as a thumb rule, what we recommend is that this dedupe pool storage, which is used for typically, long-term retention of data, this typically does not, can be your lower performance storage tier. This just stores the data. You don't do a lot of activities with that. Whereas the snap pool storage, it really comes down to what type of testing are you going to perform. For example, if you're going to do a lot of functionality related testing, right, which doesn't really need a lot of performance. So for example, typically, I was a software engineer a few years ago. So if I remember, 90% of my life was spent in typing in the code and debugging through in a debugger window. To do such testing, it does not need performance. Most of it is functionality related, making sure the logic of the code is correct. So to do that type of testing, a lower performance storage tier is absolutely fine in the snap pool, right? However, at a certain phase, there comes a certain phase in your development life cycle where the functionality testing is done, the security testing is done, and now you got to do the performance testing. You got to hit those boundary conditions to figure out, what are your guardrails in your software. So that's when the functionality testing will be done, and of course UAT testing might also be done. Those are the two use cases where you might want to consider a higher performance storage in the snap pool. That's how I would differentiate between the various phases on what storage to use.
Got it. Great. Thank you. How about masking? Does Actifio offer data masking scripts?
So we contemplated on that, but what we very quickly realized is that data masking is something which is very specific to the database schema, and every customer, depending on what their applications they have, they're going to have a different schema. So there is no way we could come up with a script which could mask their data, right? So so recognizing that what we do today, and many customers leverage our workflow engine, is that they can create their own scripts, right? So they have their own scripts. For example, if there is a specific table in a database which has the first column as an index and the second column as social security numbers, as an example, so they would want to mask all those social security numbers with some other random numbers. So if they were to do that, they can write their own script, and as part of the test dev workflow engine, you could specify that script. So the way Actifio would do is that it would take a snapshot from this snap pool, and it would mount it to a scrubbing server. Let's assume there is a scrubbing virtual machine where the scripts exist. And once that snap is mounted, automatically Actifio workflow is going to invoke that script, and that script is now going to basically do the following. Number one, bring up the SQL services, attach this database into the SQL instance. Number three, start the script so that it's going to go and mask the columns. And number four, it's going to shut down the SQL database. Number five, it's going to unmount. So, and then it's going to take a snapshot of that and present it to these 5 virtual machines. So this is, so we offer a framework in which a customer could offer their own script and everything else is automated.
Great, thank you. So I have a question here from Ian, and it popped after we started the discussion about the snap pool. So can you have more than one snap pool? For instance, one pool with a slow disk drive, another with an SSD, different testing types? And if not, is this a planned feature?
The answer is yes. We absolutely can have multiple snap pools. To give you a perfect example, let's assume a 3-tier application, okay? So where you have a SQL database or an Oracle database which has 1 terabyte database, and let's assume you have like 5 app servers and 10 web servers and an Active Directory, right? So if this is your logical architecture of an application, typically what would happen is the web servers and the app servers, generally they are not IOPS intensive, right? They're compute or memory intensive. So those type of virtual machines, their data can be placed on a lower performance storage snap pool. Whereas if the database, 1 terabyte database, that's where the maximum, it's very IOPS hungry generally. So that's the volume that you would place it on a higher performance snap pool storage.
Got it. Thank you. And there's a question here about sharing the presentation. Yes, what we'll do is we'll get both the video link and the presentation, and we'll put it out on one of the sites. Okay, let's see. A slide, so from Wayne, a slide shows a one-to-one relationship between the primary site to dev, test, DR when using Sky Virtual. However, is there an end-to-one relationship support with Sky?
Absolutely. So
yes, we do have a fan-in capability for Sky and for our physical appliance as well, right? So we can have up to 50 virtual appliances fan in to a single virtual appliance depending on the capacity and the throughput you have on the target. So you can have a single virtual appliance replicate out to multiple pieces. So if you have Oracle, you want to go to cloud A, and SQL you want to go to cloud B, that's possible. And you can also do from cloud A and cloud B both virtual appliances replicating into CenturyLink Cloud. Both the situations are possible.
Excellent. Thank you. So putting my IT hat on and worrying about compliances, and can you talk about, are there role-based authentication controls?
Yes, so we do have user and role-based authentication. So wherein we can say if there's an admin user can come in and create backup policies, or we can have a certain user that only can view the reports. So we do have role-based access controls for the various policy actions as well as the reporting actions on the Actifio appliance.
I think there's a little bit more to that, Ashok, if I may add. So for example, if Ashok is an engineer who is concerned with a SQL database, and I'm an engineer who is concerned with an Oracle database, and Jim, if you are an administrator of Actifio, you want to put role-based access controls in Actifio so that when Ashok invokes an API to see what are the images available in Actifio to be mounted, you want Ashok to view only the SQL image, and you want Chandra, me, to view only the Oracle image. So that's the first thing you would do as an administrator in Actifio as RBAC. So now, if we all are being driven by our own APIs, so when Ashok invokes an API to enumerate all the instances available in Sky, even though the Sky might have like 1,000 backup images available, it's going to enumerate only the SQL instance for Ashok, and when I ask for the enumeration, it's going to allow only Oracle instance for me. So that is the level of granularity it goes down all the way to an individual application or a machine.
Thank you, Chandra. That's accurate. Yep.
Great. Thank you. And Wayne has another question here. In terms of designing your architecture, how do you size this? Can you talk a little bit about the process, and is there a paper that covers, how you would size and design your
So from a sizing capability, right, there are two fundamental pieces that go into sizing. One is the amount of data you want to manage in the appliance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically, you have 5 terabytes of Oracle, 4 terabytes of file system, 3 terabytes of SQL. So that's basically the volume of data you want Actifio to manage. That goes into the equation. And how often do you want to capture it? And there is a piece where deduplication is very subjective to the amount of change rate. And basically what happens is, depending on your organization and the business needs, that will depend, your change rate will vary. And what for the large capacity we can offer here, so basically, so putting those two numbers together, and the third equation is how long you want to keep the data, right? So if somebody wants to keep a 1 terabyte database for 7 years, well, they're going to need a lot more space than a person that's keeping the database for 30 days. So these three factors go in, and we have a sizing tool that will tell you what type of appliance you need. At this point, our virtual appliance each virtual appliance can go up to 50 terabytes of stored data, and the hardware appliance can go up to 100 terabytes of data.
So it is not uncommon, Jim, for customers to use physical appliances in their data center, or some of them use virtual appliances, which is Sky. And in the cloud, they would use the Sky virtual appliances. So if one of the customer has 90 terabytes as an example, they would spin up 2 Sky appliances in the cloud.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned earlier, you've got both the physical appliances for on-site deployment and the virtual appliances, which how long did it take us to get this up in the CenturyLink cloud?
It took us about 20 minutes to install and configure the appliance in the cloud environment.
Yeah, so that's great. It's great testimonial to how quickly you can
deploy. It deploys in minutes, essentially. You can start using the appliance once you have the software in less than an hour.
Yes. That's a great story to be able to spin up. It gives you independence in terms of cloud providers. You can move your environments around, and you can mix and match. So that's really good. How about, is it possible to, this is from Derek, is it possible to back up and restore the base OS? Also, if so, would it be, sorry, the thing's moving around here. Would it be a way, was there a way to spin up another copy?
So that's what actually, so we remember the slide where we talked about the 3 use cases. Let me bring that up. So resiliency, mobility, and agility. So we have a product called Actifio Resiliency Director, which works with both Sky and the physical appliance. Basically, that's exactly what Resiliency Director does. From a DR perspective, it captures the entire virtual machine on the production side, and then on the DR side, it will bring up that entire virtual machine. It orchestrates. You can actually specify that, okay, I have 100 virtual machines in the production, so I'm going to create a plan which says I have 3 virtual applications, and these 3 applications, each application, for example, constitutes 30 virtual machines. You can specify the order in which each VM can be recovered. And then, not only that, but you can also give a persona for each of the virtual machine in the cloud, change the CPU, memory, change the IP address as an example, VM name, etc. And you store all of this information, let's call this as metadata in a DR plan. And then at the time of disaster recovery or at the time of testing, all you have to do is log on to this UI, and you pick the plan and you say execute, and it's going to bring up that entire virtual machine on the second side.
Got it. Very good. And Sandra has a question. I think we might need a little bit more, but what is the dedupe ration?
Dedupe ratio. Okay.
Oh, ratio. Sorry. Sorry.
So again,
I was wondering what that was.
So the dedupe ratio, again, starting out, it's very subjective. It depends on the type of data you're protecting and the level of change rate. So but as a matter of rule of thumb, right? We are able to, and also you should remember that we only capture the actual image once, and for that image, and because we're a global deduplication appliance, so we deduplicate the image application A with all the other applications that the Sky appliance or the CDS appliance is seeing. We do get pretty good deduplication, and with the daily incremental backups that you see, we'll roughly get about 2 to 1 in terms of just reducing the incremental changes by half. So that's roughly the numbers you work with.
So typically the thumb rule, Jim, which we use with our customers is that if you have 100 terabytes of data and you want to maintain 30 versions of 30 copies of the full backup, right? So which means 100 terabytes and 30 copies. You don't need 30 times 100, which is 3,000 terabytes. You just need 100 terabytes. So if there is 100 terabytes at production that needs to be protected, our deduplication can crunch it down sufficiently so that if you need 30 versions of that, you would need only 100 terabytes. So that's our thumb rule.
Great. Talking about APIs, do you offer any APIs that list the images, mounts, unmounts of the images?
Yes. Yes, all of those operations as are driven by the user interface can also be driven by script. So yes, all of these capabilities are available today via APIs. You can list images. You can specify, what image you want to mount on which machine. You can discover hosts. All of those things are possible.
Great. So, looking at the whole chain of dedupe, copy, talk a little bit about what are the factors that impact performance of testing?
So I think there are couple of key factors which would impact testing is underlying storage. That's the biggest thing, right? So underlying storage, are you trying to do functionality testing or performance testing? And as I said, if you're trying to do performance testing, but you spin up the storage on absolutely commoditized data storage, the performance is going to be, low, right? So the first criteria is to ensure that depending on the type of testing you're doing, you place the volumes on the right storage tier. Assuming that has been done, the second thing that would impact the performance is how many virtual copies are you doing, right? So for example, if there are three let's say that there is a dev engineer, there's a QA engineer, and then there is a UAT user, and all these three are going to do performance testing simultaneously on 3 virtual copies of the same SQL 1 terabyte database, you should expect some performance impact because of the fact that multiple people are reading and writing on the same volume. So you should expect some level of thrashing. But again, the performance would go back to being dependent on the underlying storage. So for example, in CenturyLink Cloud, if the SSD storage is what is being provisioned because of the fact that you knew that you're going to have performance testing, not only just the performance testing, but performance testing conducted by 3 users or 5 users, then that's the right strategy to leverage the underlying solid-state disk storage in CenturyLink Cloud. So those are the 2 key factors, in my opinion, which go into the performance testing. Another important aspect is, obviously, now this becomes very application dependent, right? So if you're testing it on a SQL or an Oracle database, and you have large amount of memory in that virtual machine, wherein, and then obviously the database algorithms are designed to cache a lot of the stuff in the memory, and hence you don't have to do a lot of I/O, and hence things work out fast. But if you come out with a configuration of 4 gig memory for a large SQL database where they actually need 64 gig of memory, that's another factor that would impact the performance. Anything else, Ashok?
So the only other thing I would add, Chandra, is the network as well, right? So you need to be cognizant of the fact that if you're replicating, 4 sites are replicating into a target site, make sure there's enough bandwidth in the target to receive data from all the 4 sites. And also, as you're in the same thing goes for ingest and restore. If you only have a single gigabit connection, if 10 clients are reading it, they're all going to be sharing the same gigabit connection, so your throughput might be compromised.
I think this is where typically good clouds, which have been designed to have everything 10 gig interfaces in the back end, choice of those cloud providers makes a huge difference.
Absolutely does.
Absolutely. Very good. So another question from Wayne. Is Sky supported on HyperV, and can you protect HyperV?
Sky, it's definitely on the roadmap that Sky will be running natively on HyperV at some point in 2015. And Sky at this point can manage HyperV. Sky can manage a HyperV environment, protect all the VMs, and give you the same level of protection as it does for other applications and sources.
So Ashok, is it primarily a matter of certification for Sky on HyperV, or?
At the point, yes. So the Sky as an architecture has been built to be infrastructure agnostic, so we need to certify it on various platforms. So like I said, CenturyLink, we were seeing that platform for the first time, but we were able to stand it up pretty quickly. Right. Similar to, so is Amazon. So we're working on a number of platforms, Azure being one of it, HyperV being one more, VMware, and all of those capable platforms. So.
Great, and that's the next one we could tackle with you guys. Okay, I think we're getting close to the end. Do you want to put the last slide up?
Yes.
So so just to reiterate, we will post the recorded session out on a variety of different websites. Thank you all for attending. If you have any questions, please, we've got our contact information. Both myself and my business partner, Tati Mladenoff, from Agitare Technologies are available to help you understand a little bit more about the Actifio products. We're well versed in a variety of different cloud platforms, including the CenturyLink Cloud, and we could help you with follow-up demos. We can bring in the Actifio engineering team as appropriate. So again, thank you all for attending, and guys, thanks this is a great discussion.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.